Hello, I'm John Rush, I'm the emotions expert. And today we're going to be talking about dealing with unsympathetic people, including your parents. It's strange in life, you want to do the best for yourself, and maybe you want to do the best for other people as well, and try and meet a happy halfway house in both of those aspects. But often when you want to do something, you come across people who are not on the same wavelength, who have other ideas, other thoughts, other feelings. They have feelings about you, which may not be all that good. They may not be bad, but they may be not all that good either. And within all that, there's you. You're trying to do the best for yourself. You have your own ideas and thoughts and feelings which are pertinent to you and nobody else. Nobody else can share them. And you don't want to share them with anybody else either because they mean everything to you. And this is your inner self which you're talking to. This is your inner self which you want to sort of chat about things, and we all talk to ourselves in some way, either literally or in our own minds, about what we want to do. We discuss things, we mull over things, we think things. Sometimes we overthink things, and a lot of people overthink things and they create scenarios which don't exist, and probably 99% of the time will never exist either, but we think them and we think about things far too much and too often, and we churn them and regurgitate them over again and again and again. And every time we regurgitate them over again in our minds, we add something else, another scenario, and then we can become quite despondent about the results or the possible ramifications of what we've just been thinking about. And then something takes our mind off all of that, and reality hits home, and none of it was any good anyway. It was all a waste of time. It was us just taking a walk on the wild side in our own mind, our own feelings about something, and trying to come to some kind of a simulated reasoning as to why and why not, and why should I, and why did they, and all this business, and if I could, and if they couldn't, and all of these kind of things. We just try and shove everything into the melting pot and see what happens. And more often than not, very little does happen. We've got to actually act and put something way in place for it to actually see what is possibly going to happen. Then we can physically act on it as well. And we can also get more mental feedback by looking at that and assimilating all that information and adding the pertinent bits which make it a wholesome aspect of our thought patterns. However, we come to a certain place in life where we have to talk about things. Maybe if we're at home, still living at home, we have to talk about things to our parents. We have some degree of responsibility to say something to them, even if they're not on our wavelength, because they don't understand. And it's one of those things. They're not meant to understand everything. And quite often what you're going to say is new to them. And it probably will be always new to them. It may be beyond their comprehension as to what you've said, or in an area which is completely outside their knowledge or volition, or in fact, it could be something which is so alien to them that it's like talking in a foreign language. They hear what you're saying, but it just doesn't ring a bell. It's like the wise old owl, the light's on, but there's nobody at home. And when you're dealing with that, that can be get a response in one of two ways. They can either say, well, look, it sounds amazing, but I haven't a clue what you're talking about. But whatever you want to do, we will support you. We love you. We support you. And that's it. Or they can, in fear, go back into their shell and put something forward and say, well, I don't care what you say. It doesn't sound very good to me. It doesn't sound very wholesome. I think you're going to have lots of problems. I think you're going to really get yourself into a mess doing this. Now, that could be actually true. But by the same token, it could be also only their response because they haven't a clue what you're talking about. And this is their negativity coming to the fore. This is their negativity coming out in their own way to protect themselves, not necessarily you. I mean, they probably won't want you to make a mess of your life anyway. But it's also about them. They don't want to acquiesce and say, yes, you go ahead, on the verge of you doing it and then you making a mess of it, because they may feel partly responsible for saying, yes, go ahead and do it. That's entirely up to them. It's different folks, different strokes, and that's the way things are. But if you're dealing with unsympathetic people, then it's very difficult for yourself. And you've got to understand the other person's point of view. Even if that other person is not a nice person, they're quite nasty and vindictive and moody and thoughtless and insensitive, and they don't like you, fine, that's okay. That's the way it is. That's the way it happens to be. And that's the way life is. You can't dictate how you would like people to be, because it's just not going to work that way. You've got to accept and very quietly think, wow, I didn't expect that. But anyway, it's happened. They were like that. I'm not going to overreact to anything. I'm just going to think to myself, fine, it happened. And that's it. Fine, it happened. And I've just got to deal with the best I can in my way, my own quiet way, and do it so I don't get any more negative feedback such as I've just had. This is all about dealing with negative people. You will get negative people in the places where you work. It could be even your boss and your or line manager that has less knowledge about the job than you do. And you could be actually trying to push water uphill, trying to explain to them something which they should know. And they're feeling threatened because you know more than they do. So they're putting up a barrier. This is not uncommon. I've actually experienced this. I mean, there are ways and means, excuse me, of getting over this, but it's down to you to actually do something, not just sit on your laurels and wait and hope and wish and say, well, I've tried and nobody's listening and nobody cares. And this is a really good idea. You know, deep down, quite often, if what you have is good. And if other people don't accept that, that's fine. That's the way things are. You can't accept everybody will enjoy what you've done, or some people will actually become jealous of what you've done for probably the first time in their life. Because you've come up with something, and even if it's just a fluke, you've come up with it. The mere fact you have come up with it can actually throw them into a bit of a quandary in themselves. So you've got to really look at dealing with unsympathetic people and find ways around it. There are ways around it. There are ways you do things. You can go above them if they're in a company and just talk, or write it down, or email privately, or do something, or even have a word with somebody very high up in the company. Because sometimes you've really got to hit the top echelon of people, because the one or two people above you, or your manager or line manager and above them, still don't understand. And if you go to quite often employment agencies or headhunters, and they ask for people who have a thought process out of the box, but when you actually come with something out of the box, and you have to actually have something which is beyond their comprehension, because they know a reasonable amount of the jobs and what they do and everything, but they don't have a physical hands-on understanding of it, where you may have more than a hands-on understanding of it. You may have a fairly comprehensive knowledge of many aspects, which puts you head and shoulders above what they're talking about. And you can actually come back with a plan. Now, if they're very bright people, they'll say, wow, we've got a real bright spark here. Let's nurture this person and see where we go and take him further on. Or you could say, well, it's not what we're looking for at the moment. We think he may be a bit disruptive because he's a bit, seems to be a bit arrogant or knowledgeable. And we want someone who will fit in, who is quite clever, but will fit in more than actually push the waters away. And you've got to understand that this is their point of view. It may be completely wrong what they're doing, and it probably is, but you've got to do it yourself. So you've got to go beyond and say, well, listen, I've had this experience in my life, and I've been sort of rejected on a lower level, and I've gone higher up, and they've taken me straight away and said, wow, we've been looking for someone like you for ages. Let's just do it. And they've told HR, just this guy's going to join the company. Whatever you've done in the past, destroy, do it. And it works. So you've really got to be quite creative in what you want to do. It doesn't happen in all walks of life. It could be that a lot of your friends all of a sudden don't understand what you want to do, because you develop, you evolve, you move forward, you've got more information, maybe you've got more finances, and so you can do more than you could do before. You put yourself in a position whereby you're changing who you are. And this is going to produce some flack with other people. They may be unsympathetic. They may not understand you anymore. They may compare you of the past to you of now, but you are living now. You're not living in the past. We all can look back in our lives and say, once upon a time I did this, but now I'm doing that, and I'm going to do something else, something completely different. And that's going to happen as well. So that's going to go forward. You've got to understand where you need to go, what you need to do, and how you need to do it. Don't be put off by unsympathetic people. Make a headway. It changes. There's no great formula for this. It changes from person to person, situation to situation, and area to area, and part of life to part of life. And it just evolves, and people evolve. And what people said one day, they may support you. Another day, they may turn around and say, well, I've had second thoughts. You've got to understand that this is what life is all about. Don't get despondent, disheartened, or upset, or discouraged, or anything. Just think, wow, take a deep breath and think, okay, fine. And I'm moving on, and you move on. And when you move on, you'll find actually you'll get solutions will come up because you'll be knowledgeable in what you're doing and what you're saying. Other people you've hit an impasse with because it's hit a plateau with them and they cannot actually understand what you're saying. And they just don't want to. It's too frightening, too scary, too outside of the box for them. And that's okay, because you realize now that that person isn't as bright and as wonderful and as marvelous as you thought they would be or could be. And they've plateaued out, and that's all right. All of these things are okay. You've got to do things for yourself. And when you do things for yourself in this respect, you'll find that you can deal with most people very proficiently, maybe not in the way you want it to do, or we're all experts of hindsight, but nevertheless, you will deal with people proficiently, and it'll make the going far easier.